Hi everyone, this is a short screencast for Independent Colleges Dublin for CIMA E2 for November 2014. And what we're going to focus on here is the BPP question 56a on page 23, and that equates to a question within the March 2012 paper, in fact question number 6. So question 6a March 2012. Now, if we look at the requirements on this particular question, we're looking specifically at project planning and indeed a PID, or a project initiation document. Okay, I'll take you through the question in a moment, but essentially what we're saying here is, how would a PID have helped in this particular case, because there are a series of issues, a series of problems. And over and above that, what would be included in a project initiation document for a given company? Okay, so we'll just take a quick look through the question itself, and then I'll take you through the answer. So question number 6, what we've got is S company dealing with a project involving the refurbishment of a local hotel. Okay, we've got a set time scale, very tight, of 30 weeks. It's not flexible. And there is no contingency of any kind. A little bit of a bad sign to start off with, and what you'll see is, if we flow down the question, just really a series of issues or a series of problems, and this would be the typical way that the examiner would come at many of the issues within project management, but particularly any areas associated with planning. In other words, he'll give you a scenario where the planning is non-existent or a little bit poor, and ask you to apply normal PM sort of tools and techniques or procedures to that situation and look at the upside. Okay, so what they have produced within S company is pretty vague. They have a brief document as outlined within para 2 here, and no detailed specification of what's required. So the warning signs are already there. Now B, unlucky for him, has been appointed as the project manager, and it's clear that there's no sort of detailed plan. In fact, he's focused on the project team rather than a detailed plan or a PID in any way, shape or form. He's hoping that project management software, which certainly is useful, is going to help him to sort of plug these gaps, and that's highly unlikely. The project team understandably are concerned about the sort of lack of control, or indeed controls, and the fact that there's no milestones at all. So the situation gets worse as we go down the page here. We'll see that some of the core staff have been released from the project, and indeed as a result of that, we've got lateness on phase 1, and indeed no first stage payment as well. Okay, over and above that, we see that some or requirement for additional activities to be added to the original specification for this particular project. So first part of this question really just sort of details your common scenario where there are a series of problems, all of which are down to a lack of planning and indeed a lack of a PID. Okay. B, the project manager has asked about the document. Probably feels as if he needs one, but it's been reiterated that the only document is the brief document outlined above. So there's the basic scenario. There's a problem. How is a PID or indeed planning going to help? So let's have a quick look at the answer here. Now what we'll see here is we start off with really, the first part of the requirement. Let's make sure that we answer the question. And what we're required to do here is just really outline what a PID is. And it's fairly straightforward when you think about it, sometimes known as a sort of a charter. But we're just really looking at just about every aspect that you would want to have documented or in writing in some way, shape or form in relation to any sort of venture, any project of any kind. They summarize it here for us. They talk about the mission, in other words, why, the scope, what's required in terms of objectives and deliverables, roles and responsibilities, obviously, of the key stakeholders, and indeed, an overall sort of overriding sort of terms of reference. So, PID is very much a base document that can be referred back to, and in that sense, it's very, very useful to assess sort of project progress, as it were. Okay, so the specifics, this is a rote learning area for us. We just really need to rote learn these areas, and if we're stuck in the exam, try and think of the types of things that you would want to see within a plan, really for anything, project or otherwise. So let me take you through the main contents. The first thing that we talk about here is a sort of a purpose statement, or indeed perhaps a project mission. And really what we're saying here is that we're outlining why the project is necessary, why it's taking place. In other words, why the refurbishment is required. Over above that, we've got a scope statement. This is an important area within project management because we're really talking about boundaries, and you'll see this examined fairly regularly. This idea of creep, in other words, the project creeping, and in fact, it's happening within this particular project because they're talking about adding additional activities. Okay, so the scope statement is going to set out the main activities and try and avoid any sort of creep, as it were. Okay, deliverables. For deliverables, read sort of objectives, and we're looking at so the tangible aspects. The exact requirements in respect of the refurbishment, and you'll see within some of these a little bit of a sort of an overlap between one or two of them. Don't be worried about that if you find yourself repeating yourself. I think just make sure that you deal with these sort of key buzz terms in terms of objectives. It may well be that you include that up within your sort of terms of reference at the start as well. So really for deliverables, we're talking about the exact requirements. Now, cost and time, and indeed quality, core elements, and we call that the triangle, the iron triangle within project management. But certainly some sort of estimate in terms of time scales are important. It's an important starting point, as they mention here. We've got 30 weeks. It looks as if they're already overrunning on that. So we need to have some sort of time estimates, and over and above that, we need to have some sort of cost estimates in some way. Refer you to your studies on the various techniques, WBS, etc. And certainly cost is a key issue, and budget overrun is a common problem. So within this PID, some sort of reference towards costings and indeed timescales. Now, a little bit of overlap here. You'll see us referring to project constraints, and the main constraints are obviously time, cost, and quality. Under that resources heading, obviously would have cost in there, but over and above that, core staff. And that's an issue here because core staff are being released, or indeed have been released from this project. So a PID would set out exactly what the constraints are in terms of staffing and indeed costs. Stakeholders is an important area, and you'll note that they're very clear here on what we should include, apart from the fact that we need to list them. We need to know what their needs or indeed wants are. Okay, so that's very, very important for us. Over and above that, with stakeholders, we'll be able to assess, perhaps risks associated with individual stakeholders. Okay. Last point really is this idea of structure. Perhaps a diagram of the structure of the organization, and that will enable us to clarify roles and responsibilities, and indeed sort of authorizations or indeed controls. The other area that will help us in is this area of change, okay, and that's important, change management within project management. Last point here is just over and above the structure. We should, within this section, outline details for meetings, for comms and reports. Okay, so that's a sort of a basic summary. Very much rote learning for the PID in terms of the definition and the constituent elements. But this is an important area. Project planning is regularly examined. So I'd certainly have a grip on this before you walk into that exam. So I hope that's been helpful. More videos to come. Cheers.